What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel, guys. I had this video suggested to me, so I was like, let's check it out and see what it's about. We got, why does Sweden no longer want immigrants? I know this is probably one of those very political, touchy subjects right here. I don't often tap into, but I was like, you know what? Let's see what it's about since it was just suggested to me. Y'all hit that subscribe button. Hey, send me more suggestions, and let's see. Why don't they don't no longer want immigrants? That's always interesting.
Today's video is made possible by Masterworks. More on this in a moment.
What in the world type of intro? Oh.
Pay close attention to these surprising statements by Sweden's Prime Minister, Social Democrat leader Magdalena Andersson.
Swedish PM says integration of immigrants has failed, fueled gang crime.
Oh, dang.
Integration has been too poor at the same time, as we have had large immigration. Society has been too weak. Resources for the police and social services have been too weak. Segregation has been allowed to go so far that we have parallel societies in Sweden.
Dang, and somebody... I want to check it out because somebody sent me a video about the gang violence in Sweden and like the crimes and stuff. It's a pretty lengthy video, but I may check it out. If y'all want me to check it out, I will. It looked like a pretty lengthy video, but I've seen some people comment saying like the crime rates have been going up and stuff. So shoot, that's different right there.
Segregation has been allowed to go so far that we have parallel societies in Sweden. We live in the same country, but in completely different realities. Magdalena Andersson, Swedish PM.
Let's see. Here we have a Social Democrat leader who is also in power, making statements like this about immigration. That is definitely not common at all. Something very serious must be going on in Sweden, don't you think? What exactly is the Prime Minister referring to, and why has the immigration issue come to the forefront in one of the most open countries in the world? What exactly is going on in Sweden? But before we examine the different realities in Sweden, let me talk to you about a company that may change your perception of investing realities. Masterworks. Celebrities, political leaders, and titans of industry. Now more than ever, they're putting their money towards one thing in particular: fine art. You see, the S&P 500 is down 17% from its annual high, and the 10-year treasury continues to slip. Yet the art market has shown resilience. In fact, in May 2022, the auction houses saw record prices. Christie's sold 831
interesting sponsorship ad for this type of video or controversy.
$1,261,500 of art in just 7 days. And Sotheby's Maclo sale achieved a record total sale of $922 million. The global head of Citi Private Bank Art Advisory and Finance said that the Maclo sale showed there was still plenty of demand for works by museum-validated names. That's because more than just serving as decoration for mansions, fine art can be an amazing way to protect wealth and possibly earn a handsome return on investment. So we weren't surprised to learn that 85% of wealth managers recommend it as part of a portfolio, according to Deloitte. And with a new millionaire made every 17 minutes in 2021, the demand for high-end pieces keeps rising. This means the already limited supply of fine art could skyrocket in value. So how can we position ourselves to take advantage of this boom without needing millions for a painting? Well, with Masterworks, you can get high-value art into your portfolio for a fraction of the full cost, because you're investing an amount you choose into shares in a painting.
It's gonna be an interesting transition going from art to immigration, art to crimes and all that stuff.
Of millions for the full piece. We think it's a revolutionary idea, and seeing as how all the paintings they've sold so far have returned over 30% net of fees to members, the value is just incredible. Of course, past performance is no guarantee of future results, but if you want to check them out, check the link in the description for priority access that allows you to skip their waiting list.
Oh, dang. What movie is Police?
Panic figures.
Pay close attention to the following figures, because I am sure that more than one or two of you are going to be very, very surprised. In 2021, 335 shootings were recorded in Sweden, resulting in 47 fatalities. Yes, it's true. If you're watching us from the United States or Latin America, then these numbers may seem like a joke, almost a happy utopia. Even
come on now, I think we definitely multiplying those by 20.
From the United States or Latin America, then these numbers may seem like a joke.
Matter of fact, it was just, I don't know if y'all know, it was just a young rapper that just passed away from a shooting just yesterday, around this same time, or at least our time. So it's crazy out here. At a Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles, just eating chicken and waffles with his girlfriend and kids and end up getting shot and killed. It's crazy.
Almost a happy utopia. Even if we take into account the differences in
dang.
population, the data is infinitely better than what the United States or practically any Latin American country registers every year. For example, in 2020, in the United States alone, homicides and shootings took the lives of more than 23,000 people. We're talking about completely different scenarios. By European standards, however, the Swedish statistics are striking.
Let's see.
Sweden is the country in Europe where firearms-related crime is growing the most and has one of the highest fatality rates. For example, while Sweden has an average of 4 deaths per million inhabitants per year due to firearms, the European average is 1.6. What's more, unlike the rest of Europe, the trend in Sweden is increasing.
Dang, this made me want to check out that video, because I'm telling you, somebody sent, I don't know if it was last month or when, but I was like, you know what, but it's just been a thing that's been talked about here recently that's been coming up a lot about crimes and guns and stuff.
This is an unusual fact. All this means, for example, that the probability of a man between the ages of 15 and 29 being shot is 10 times higher in Sweden than it is in Germany.
Oh wow.
Sweden tops Europe in fatal shootings, report shows. In less than a decade, Sweden has overtaken Italy and Eastern European countries to have the highest number of fatal shootings in Europe.
But that's not all. In 2019, 260 crimes involving explosions were recorded across Sweden, an increase of 60% over the previous year. We're talking about bombs and explosive devices that are often detonated in public spaces, mostly outside apartment developments and in small businesses. Surprised? If we add
it sounds like the U.S. kind of rubbing off on Sweden. Gosh.
in public spaces, mostly outside apartment developments and in small businesses. Surprised? If we add this to the fact that Sweden has the highest rates of rape and sexual violence in Europe, and that hate crimes against minorities, such as LGBT people, are also on the rise, then the picture becomes very clear. Obviously, there is a problem in Sweden.
I gotta find this movie.
Surprisingly, however, if we look at all crimes, Sweden's crime rate is not particularly high. It is within the European average. In other words, the Nordic country has a particular problem with weapons, explosives, sexual violence, and attacks on minorities. Or, in other words, in the European context, Sweden has a fundamental problem with violent and sexual crimes. And this is precisely why the Swedes are by far the Europeans most concerned about crime. For them, it is already the #1 concern. And this also helps to explain the words of the Prime Minister, Magdalena Andersson, which we saw at the beginning of this video.
Let's see, issues of greatest concern to citizens. So we got the EU 27. I don't know what EU 27 is. I'm guessing the other countries, maybe. So, dang. Sweden up there, though, when it comes to all the EU. Dang. Right there, the crime is not even closed. Taxation is closed. Energy supply, Sweden. Education, Sweden. Government debt. There's this low. Climate change, unemployment, inflation. Those are some close numbers, though.
Now at this point, the question I'm sure many of you are wondering is, what the hell is going on in Sweden? What on earth could explain such a wave of violence? Well, most of the shootings and explosions in Sweden involve organised crime gangs. And you see, in this Nordic country, 8 out of 10 shootings are related to criminal gangs. The problem that is causing most concern is that more than half, 53% of those sentenced to prison were born abroad. This percentage rises to almost 90% of those suspected of involvement in shootings if we take into account both...
That's crazy, because I feel like it may be the opposite in the U.S. for sure, like, because most of the gang violence is pretty much within who you being born in that, you know, that town or that state or wherever you're at. Like, that's within, but that's crazy. 53% of crimes coming from people that were born abroad. That's crazy. That's a big percentage.
And second-generation offenders. VISUALPOLITIK viewers, obviously we do not intend to point the finger at anyone because of their origin in this video. On the contrary, you know that on VISUALPOLITIK we are all for things like freedom of movement, and we think that migratory movements are a powerful engine of prosperity, as long as things are handled correctly, of course. That's why with this video, we want to put forward some factors that can hinder effective integration, and that is how the situation in Sweden can be radically different from countries like Australia, New Zealand, or even the United States. Remember the headline at the beginning of the video?
Swedish PM says integration of immigrants has failed, fueled gang crime.
Well, exactly that. So, in order to understand this whole situation, we have to ask ourselves a few questions. Is the rise of violent crime in Sweden really only the fault of immigrants? What responsibility do public authorities...
I ain't gonna lie, it seems like, crime rates everywhere have been going up a lot lately, as we can see. Like, these times are different now. Everything is, I'm sure y'all see in the U.S., like, just with the school shootings and stuff, it's so crazy that they have to teach kids to practice these type of drills to avoid a school shooter. Like, the crime rates are ridiculous. Like, and like I said, this is a everywhere thing. It ain't even just a one place point looking at one. I know we focusing on Sweden right now, but if you just look around, like, crime has been increasing everywhere, especially in places that it don't normally do it.
Authorities, that is politicians, carry here. Where, if at all, has Sweden failed? Well, let's take a look.
A single culprit?
VISUALPOLITIK fans, in Sweden, there is one key component that links immigration and crime: social exclusion. But wait a minute, before some of you cry out loud, no, we are not going to tell you the usual story that crime is justified exclusively by poverty, and that, therefore, the solution is to give more aid and subsidies of all kinds. This is a very complex issue, in which we are able to find many contributing factors, in which poverty plays a very important role. But if there is a surplus of anything in Sweden, it is precisely public aid and subsidies. In fact, although it may seem contradictory, this excess of public funds may help explain much of the tsunami of exclusion and crime that the Scandinavian country has experienced, at least by European standards. And it's not just us saying this. This is something that even the Social Democrat Prime Minister seems to be starting to be very clear about. The fact is that, in Sweden, the immigration population receives enormous amounts of public aid, particularly if they are asylum seekers. But there is one benefit that stands out above the rest. It is the child allowance, a benefit that is not exclusive to immigrants. In 1982, when Sweden began to experience very low birth rates, an allowance was created to provide families with a generous income.
So it's only for people that were born there? Huh. That's interesting.
To experience very low birth rates. An allowance was created to provide families with a generous income for having children. And no, we're not talking about a one-off baby check. We are talking about an allowance that every person legally resident in Sweden receives from the month after birth until the child reaches 16 years of age.
So as long as you're a resident, you can receive this. I remember hearing about this in other videos.
Resident in Sweden receives from the month after birth until the child reaches 16 years of age. And under certain circumstances, this allowance can even be extended until the child is 20 years old. So what does the Swedish state offer for each child? Well, basically a subsidy of at least 1,250 krona, which is about 120 euros, or 126 US dollars a month. And do you know what? The immigration policy has many more children on average, so this subsidy is particularly in their favour. But in addition, there are also many other provisions that especially favour them. Take, for example, rental subsidies for large families, or advantages in accessing public housing, particularly when prices are skyrocketing and there is no other way to access housing, or direct subsidies in the case of asylum seekers, among many other programs. But the question many of you may be wondering is, let's see, Josh, what's wrong with all this? What does it have to do with the problem that we're addressing in this video? Well, basically, all these aid programs have direct consequences on the labour market. Let's say that a whole lot more people end up using public assistance as more than a transitory resource. And once again, this is not only coming from us. The employment data, for example, also points to this. And what's more, that data says it clearly.
And it's crazy because I know in the United States, especially when COVID hit, it was like most people would rather do unemployment than actually work, because unemployment was paying more than people's jobs out here. So most people, they're grateful to have a job, but the people that was unemployed was making way more money. So people were like, I'm not gonna go find a job if the government giving me this every month.
The worst part is borne by women, as many of these subsidies discourage their incorporation into the labour market and their social integration, which can already be complicated in some cultures. For example, according to Eurostat in Sweden, the employment rate of foreign-born women is almost 20 points lower than the rate of women born in the country. On the other hand, these subsidies also foster a false economic stability that causes many beneficiaries not to seek regular jobs, precisely so as not to lose these subsidies. This is fuel for the creation of informal networks.
I think it works the same here. Like, you can't, in order to receive like certain government assistance, you can't make a certain amount of money, I believe. So I think it works the same here in the States.
Precisely so as not to lose these subsidies. This is fuel for the creation of informal networks that end up favouring the creation and development of criminal groups and gangs.
Wow.
In the United States and New Zealand, immigrants have higher employment rates than the native-born population. In the case of Australia and Canada, the difference in favour of native-born population is only 3.4 and 1.7 percentage points respectively. In Sweden, however, the difference is almost 15 points.
Wow.
In other words, we're talking about a completely different situation. And that's not all. By reducing employment rates and discouraging many immigrants from seeking formal full-time jobs, it also reduces their degree of integration and reduces their contact with the rest of society. Add to this public housing policies, and the result is a perfect cocktail for the gestation of ghettos, an environment particularly conducive to the development of gangs. And so, in Stockholm alone, there are an estimated...
So Sweden been developing ghettos, in which I feel like, and I have learned this as I got older, cause we lived in particular neighborhood where you would call it the ghetto, but a ghetto wasn't even like supposed to be a ghetto was just a neighborhood type thing, or it wasn't even like considered a bad thing, at least the definition. But we made it into like having a ghetto is a rough neighborhood, bad neighborhoods type thing. Like, it was a particular neighborhood, but it didn't have to particularly be bad, if that makes sense.
Particularly conducive to the development of gangs. And so, in Stockholm alone, there are an estimated 60 organised crime gangs operating throughout the city. The question is there a solution to all of this? What are the consequences of these policies? And what exactly does Social Democrat Sweden hope to do now? Well, as so often happens, bad policies not only lead to bad results, they also sometimes lead to bad answers, or at least insufficient responses.
From white to black with no clear direction.
Suddenly, Sweden is changing, and it is changing at an accelerated pace, even if the government is still in the hands of social democrat politicians. Is it going in the right direction? Well, that's another debate. The fact is that while until recently Sweden was an example of a country with open doors, these days the social and political reaction could end up feeding antagonistic and hostile movements towards this reality. For example, while in 2015, Sweden became the country that took in the most Syrian refugees by far, relative to its population, now, just 7 years later, the headlines you can find on Google if you search for immigration and Sweden are quite different.
Even Sweden doesn't want migrants anymore.
Now, the Social Democrat government itself is going to implement a new immigration law, supposedly to tackle the cause of all the problems.
New Swedish migration law makes permanent residency harder for refugees and visitors.
With the new law, people arriving from abroad will no longer have such an easy time arriving or accessing public aid, nor will it be possible to get a work permit without a contract. In addition, a minimum of 3 years living in Sweden will...
I thought like getting a work permit and stuff, it's a process anyways, I did check out a video how you can possibly do the same thing. I wouldn't say just a work permit, but having your own business in another country. I checked out the one with the Netherlands. Y'all let me know if there's a different process that you can use to be able to work in Sweden, on a permit and stuff. Because the guy in the Netherlands, he talked about how you can start a business and you can have a business in another country. It takes some, it's a process, but it costs a certain amount of money. And it'll give you 2 years to live there. Then you can renew it, give you 5. Then after that 5, you can renew it again and pretty much, be there and have that business there forever type of thing. So y'all let me know the process in Sweden, how it works.
to get a work permit without a contract. In addition, a minimum of 3 years living in Sweden will be required for permanent residence. On top of that, the justification of a minimum income of 810 euros per month will be required. The law itself does not say almost anything different from other European countries. But the point is that, in this case, the ultimate goal is that far fewer immigrants arrive. Of course, that is not the problem. Sweden has far fewer immigrants than countries like Australia, New Zealand, or Canada. But there you have it. This is the response that the Social Democrat government of Magdalena Andersson wants to give. This is a 180-degree turn in the country's politics.
That's a fact.
However, what will not change for the moment is the bulky regime of aid and subsidies, nor the housing policies to avoid the formation of ghettos, quite the contrary. The Social Democrat government of Magdalena Andersson wants to make even more money available without paying attention to relevant issues, such as the level of employment or entrepreneurship of the foreign population. Two factors that, along with education, are key to promoting integration. Make no mistake, the problem is not the number of immigrants in Sweden. The problem lies in the inefficient and inadequate system of benefits and subsidies of all kinds. In the end, such changes run the risk of criminalizing the entire foreign population without really achieving anything. And what can I say? That the government's response is to recognize the problem, blame immigration, make legal changes so that fewer foreigners come to the country, and then continue to shower those who are already there with more money? Does not seem very sensible, no matter how many votes the subsidies may generate for the ruling party. Because Sweden's problem is not immigrants, much less the lack of social spending. In fact, in Sweden, for example, social spending measured in terms of GDP is 52% higher than in Australia.
Wow.
The truth is that everything indicates that the problem is exactly the opposite. But having reached this point, it's your turn. With everything that you have seen, do you think that Sweden's real problem is immigration? Or is it instead the result of bad public policies? Leave us your comments below, and if you like this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to our
That's an
channel so
interesting
you don't miss any of our upcoming news. As always, thank you very much for being there. All the best. I'll see you next time.
That's an interesting question right there. Definitely gotta subscribe to VISUALPOLITIK. Is immigration a problem, or just with the public policies and stuff like that? So, that's definitely a good question. But I mean, y'all let me know what you think. Like you said, like with the stuff you mentioned earlier, like when it comes to crimes, when it comes to like those government assistance thing, like crime is something that, like you said, it definitely not near how it would be here in the States. Like it's probably triple that. But even with government assistance, it's always been a process. Like you'll see people work certain type of jobs so they can still receive those government assistance. Because once you make a certain amount, you can't receive those assistance. And on top of that, just think, if you do got a good job, most of that money you're gonna be paying for health insurance, dental insurance, all that insurance, which will put you probably in a bracket to be able to receive that. But they're going to be looking at, oh, you make this amount. They're not even going to take into consideration that, hey, you paying for health insurance. Nope, they ain't going to look at that. So, but this was definitely interesting, But it's like, man, what's going on in Sweden? I'm not there, so I'm sure y'all can update me, let me know what it is, what the deal is and stuff. So, but this was very informative. That's all I have for this video. Y'all hit that subscribe button. Send me more video suggestions. And y'all be blessed. Be the best and be you. I'm out.